All right, everyone, buckle up because we're diving deep into a listener request today. And trust me, this one's a real humdinger.
It's a good one.
We're going to be talking about the heart
Yes,
and its connection to electromagnetic fields,
that's right.
EMFs.
Uh-huh.
We're going to be looking at what the science says about how these invisible forces, these EMFs, might be affecting our hearts. We've got some really cool research to dig into, some cutting-edge stuff.
Yeah.
Now, for anyone who, maybe hasn't thought about physics class in a while, let's start with the basics. What exactly are EMFs?
So in the simplest terms, EMFs are what happens
Okay.
when you have electric charges moving.
Okay.
Imagine, like if you throw a rock into a pond, you get those ripples, right?
Right.
Those ripples, those are like waves of energy,
Okay.
and those waves are what we call electromagnetic fields or EMFs.
Yeah.
And the thing is, they're absolutely everywhere.
So we've got these invisible waves of energy all around us.
Yes.
But you're saying they're not all the same, right?
Right. Just like those ripples on the pond. EMFs can be big or small, fast or slow.
Got it.
We measure those as frequency and wavelength. And it's the frequency that really dictates how an EMF is going to interact with, say, our bodies.
So it's not just about whether we're exposed to EMFs, but what kind of EMFs, right?
Yeah.
Because they're not all created equal.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Think about it like this, the waves that your radio uses.
Yeah.
Totally different from the waves your microwave uses, right?
Right.
Different frequencies, different effects. Same principle applies here.
Okay, that's a really helpful analogy. So let's talk about the heart specifically. Things get even more interesting here because the heart actually generates its own EMFs, right?
It does. Your heart runs on electricity, literally.
Yeah.
Every time it beats,
Yeah.
it sends out an electrical impulse. That impulse triggers a contraction and that electrical activity.
Yeah.
It creates an electromagnetic field.
So every beat of our hearts is like this little electrical storm creating its own tiny EMF.
That's a great way to put it.
And that's what we're measuring with an EKG, right?
Exactly. It's picking up on that electrical activity. But that electrical activity, inseparable from a magnetic field. Two sides of the same coin.
That's incredible. Our hearts are like these little powerhouses generating their own EMFs. But then on top of that, we have all these external EMFs from the environment constantly bombarding us. So what happens when those external fields clash with our own internal heart-generated ones?
Ah, that is the million-dollar question.
Right.
And the answer is, it's complicated. But one thing that we know for sure is that EMFs can interact with biological processes at a cellular level, even relatively weak ones.
So even if we don't feel it, these EMFs could be messing with our cells.
It's not always about messing with them in a bad way,
Okay.
although that is a possibility. It's more about recognizing that our cells are sensitive to these fields, and even small changes can snowball into more noticeable effects down the line.
So how does that actually work? Do EMFs just like zip right through us, or are there certain areas where they have a bigger impact?
It really depends on the frequency. Different frequencies will penetrate to different depths. When it comes to the heart, a type of EMF called extremely low frequency, ELF, EMFs, those are especially important.
ELF, EMFs.
Yeah. They have longer wavelengths,
Okay.
which means they can get in deep, penetrate tissues much more easily.
So ELF, EMFs can really get in there.
They can.
Is that something to be concerned about?
It's definitely something to be aware of.
Yeah.
Because even these weaker ELF, EMFs, studies have shown they can influence cellular activity. And one of the main ways they do this is by interacting with cell membranes.
Ah, cell membranes. Those are like the guardians of the cell, right?
Exactly. Controlling what goes in and out. They're like the bouncers of the cell.
Yeah.
And even subtle changes to how they function, which EMFs can influence,
Okay.
can really throw things out of whack. And the heart, it's such a vital organ that even small disruptions can have a big impact.
So it's like we're swimming in the sea of EMFs, right?
Yeah.
Some we make ourselves and then others coming from all over the place.
Yeah, it's wild.
What are some of the things just in everyday life that we're exposed to that could be messing with our hearts?
Well, think about it. Your phone,
Mm-hmm.
your laptop,
Mm-hmm.
that fitness tracker you might be wearing, they all emit EMFs.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Then you think about your house,
Okay.
all your appliances, your Wi-Fi router,
Right.
even the wiring in your walls.
Wow.
It all adds up.
It's crazy how we're surrounded by all this invisible stuff. Like we're just going about our day, completely clueless. And you mentioned something earlier about the Earth's own magnetic field.
Ice.
That's a thing, right? Our planet has an EMF.
Absolutely. We're living in a giant one right now.
Yeah.
And it's not just any EMF. It's a massive planet-sized one that affects everything on Earth.
Okay, so how does that factor in?
Well, for starters, it's what makes compasses work.
Right.
And it protects us from harmful radiation from the sun. But here's where it gets really interesting. Remember how we were talking about ELF EMFs?
Yes.
The Earth's magnetic field is an ELF EMF, which means it can penetrate deep into our tissues. But here's the thing. It's not static. It fluctuates.
Wait, so the Earth's magnetic field isn't constant. It's like it changes or something.
It's always changing.
Yeah.
These fluctuations, they're called geomagnetic activity. And there's more and more evidence that they can actually impact our health and our hearts in particular.
Hold on. So you're saying that a magnetic field thousands of miles away can actually affect my heart?
It sounds crazy.
It does.
But think about it. Our bodies have evolved alongside this giant magnetic field. It's always been there.
That's true.
We've adapted to it over millions of years. Think about our circadian rhythms. They're synced up with the sun, right? An external force that's really far away.
Right.
It's entirely possible that our hearts have a similar sensitivity to the Earth's magnetic field. And when that field changes, even a little, it can throw things off.
So are you saying our hearts are like in tune with the Earth's magnetic field, and if it's off, we're off?
That's a great way to put it. And here's the kicker. Some studies have shown a link between periods of low geomagnetic activity.
So like when the Earth's magnetic field is calmer.
Exactly.
Okay.
They've found a link between that and an increase in heart problems.
Really? You would think a calmer magnetic field would be a good thing.
You'd think so, right?
Yeah.
But our bodies are complex. It's all about balance. Just like too much sun can be harmful.
Right.
Too little can also cause problems. Our bodies might actually need a certain level of fluctuation from the Earth's magnetic field to function properly.
So too much is bad, too little is bad. It's like our hearts need that magnetic nudge to stay on beat or something. That's pretty wild.
It is. It just goes to show how interconnected we are with the world around us, even in ways we don't totally understand yet. We've talked about some potential risks with EMFs, but what about potential benefits? I've heard about EMF therapy. Have you heard about this?
I have.
What comes to mind when you hear that?
It sounds like something out of Star Trek. Like some futuristic healing thing.
Right. It does have a kind of a sci-fi ring to it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it's actually a real area of research, and it's gaining more and more attention.
Oh, wow.
And it's all about using EMFs to help the body heal and improve health. It's pretty fascinating stuff.
So you're saying we can use EMFs as medicine?
That's the idea.
Yeah.
It might seem kind of far out, but actually this field of study has been around for decades. And while we're still in the early stages of really understanding its full potential, there's growing evidence that EMF therapy could be a big deal for treating all sorts of conditions, including heart problems.
So how does that work? Like, are you actually using EMFs to heal the heart?
That's exactly right. And one of the really promising areas is this idea of preconditioning.
Preconditioning. So, like, are you getting your heart ready for a marathon, like a pep talk?
Kind of. Basically, it involves exposing the heart to very controlled doses of EMFs.
Okay.
Think of it like giving your cells a fire drill.
Yeah.
By simulating a mild stress response, you're essentially training the heart to be more resilient to future stressors.
So you're like giving the heart a heads up, like, hey, get ready, something's coming, but don't freak out.
Yeah, exactly. And the research so far is pretty exciting. There have been studies, for example, in animals that show preconditioning with EMFs can actually protect the heart from damage during surgery or even heart attacks.
Wow. So we could use EMFs to strengthen our hearts and make them more resilient to stress. That's incredible.
That's the idea. And there's evidence that it's not just about preventing damage either. EMF therapy might actually be able to improve existing heart conditions too.
Really?
For instance, some studies suggest that certain types of EMF stimulation can help regulate blood pressure, which is huge.
Yeah.
Improve blood flow, even reduce inflammation in the cardiovascular system.
Wow, that's amazing. So we're talking about potentially revolutionizing how we approach heart health. But is this like mainstream medicine now, or is it more experimental?
It's definitely an evolving field. More research is needed to really fine-tune it, figure out the optimal protocols and long-term effects, But there are clinics and practitioners already offering EMF therapy as an alternative or complementary treatment for lots of different things, heart issues included.
Okay, so it's out there.
Yeah.
But it sounds like it's important to be careful and do your research.
100%. It's
Right.
just like any medical treatment.
Right.
You want to do your research, talk to qualified healthcare professionals, and make informed decisions.
Safety first.
Always.
All right, so we've got our own heart-generated EMFs,
Right.
this invisible symphony going on inside us.
Yeah.
And then we've got all these EMFs from our surroundings, some natural, some artificial. It's like we're living in this crazy web of electromagnetic interactions all the time. So we're living in this web of EMFs.
We are.
Some good, some bad,
Right.
maybe some ugly.
That's,
And this whole EMF therapy thing is really interesting, but has it actually lived up to the hype? What does the research say about its use in humans?
yeah. So there have definitely been some promising studies.
Okay.
One area where we're seeing some really interesting results is in using EMF therapy to help people with angina.
Angina, so that's like the chest pain,
Yeah, exactly.
reduced blood flow to the heart.
Right. So there was this study, they were using something called magnetolaser therapy.
Magnetolaser therapy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's kind of what it sounds like. They're using magnets and lasers together to deliver these targeted EMF pulses.
Wow.
And they found that it actually helped angina patients exercise for longer periods of time without experiencing that pain.
So it's like literally helping their hearts work better.
Exactly. Which is huge. Right?
Yeah, that's huge. Are there any other examples like that?
There are. They did another study. This one was looking at EMF therapy for people with low blood pressure.
Okay.
And they found that stimulating certain points on the body with EMFs, kind of like acupuncture, but with electromagnetic fields.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. They found that seemed to improve heart function and circulation in those patients.
So some really significant potential benefits for people with these kinds of conditions.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it sounds promising, but you mentioned before that it's still an evolving field. Are there any downsides or things that people should keep in mind if they're thinking about trying this?
Yeah, for sure. I think the main thing to remember is that research is ongoing. And like a lot of things in medicine, the results can be all over the place.
Okay.
What works for one person might not work for someone else at all.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And we're still trying to figure out the perfect recipe, the type of EMF, how strong it should be, how long the exposure should be. All of those things can make a difference.
So it's not just like a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Exactly. And that's why if you think about EMF therapy, it's so important to find a healthcare provider who really knows their stuff.
Yeah.
Someone who can look at your specific situation, figure out if it's right for you, and make sure you have a safe and effective treatment plan.
Safety first, always.
Absolutely.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about what EMFs are, how they affect our bodies, some of the potential risks, and some of the exciting possibilities of this whole EMF therapy thing. It's a lot to take in.
It is, yeah.
What are some of the key takeaways that you really hope our listeners walk away with?
Well, I think the most important thing is just to be curious, right? And also be a little bit critical.
Okay.
EMFs, they're everywhere. They're not all bad, but we need to be aware of them. And especially when it comes to our hearts, it's really important to understand how these invisible forces might be affecting us.
So it's about taking charge of your own health, doing your research,
Exactly.
and advocating for yourself.
Absolutely.
That's great advice for anything, really.
That's right. And, maybe just a final thought for our listeners to chew on. We talked about how our hearts actually generate their own EMFs.
We did, yeah.
This invisible symphony going on inside of us all the time.
Yeah.
And we've talked about how EMFs can affect things like stress levels. Given all of that, do you think it's possible that our emotions, our thoughts and feelings are actually playing a bigger role in our heart health than we realize? It's kind of a mind-blowing thought, right?
It really is. That's something I'm going to be thinking about for sure. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been incredibly fascinating. And to all our listeners, thanks for tuning in to this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.